Hey everybody, Jamie Starr here for the New World News Network. On today's video, I'm going to be doing a expose into what my experience has been for the past 3 years working at a nonprofit, peer-run organization within the mental health industry. My time with the organization is pretty much coming to an end, so I figured now is as good a time as any to sort of expose a lot of the faults and issues that I've witnessed over my time there. So I think it's important to first go over what the peer movement is because I was generally unaware when I signed up for the job. In a vague sense, I was told that the organization that I was working for was basically approaching the mental health industry the way Uber and Lyft do with taxis and transportation. They're looking at a system and seeing the flaws and the holes in the system and trying to fill in those voids. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen a lot of the previous videos, some of this stuff you might have already heard me mention. Um, as a kid, I grew up very sick with chronic Lyme disease. And, I was then having to see therapists and everything like that. But I was so young because therapists were recommended because I'm a kid going through potentially traumatic situations. And one of the things that always really bothered me about this whole experience was not knowing what's going on, having someone else being my proxy, making all these decisions for me, and me feeling like I'm not in the loop, but I am rather just at the mercy of everyone else. The peer movement does try to mitigate that, avoid that. Transparency is a big aspect as far as, between client, patient, and providers and all that stuff. So, I mean, there are a lot of things within this that I could really get behind. Now, a basic thing, when you Google peer movement, it says the peer movement involves advocating, spreading awareness, and working towards erasing the stigma. Mental health care has come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. Through the help of peers, professionals, and caregivers, we can recover and help eliminate the stigma. Now, interesting. They say eliminate the stigma. They're not looking to eliminate mental illness, though, which that's one of these problems because it's one of these industries where if you eliminate the problem, you put yourself out of business. And I remember specifically my supervisor coming to me one day and telling me that this isn't just a job. This is part of a rights movement. She explicitly compared it to gay rights and black rights, and that has never sat very well with me because of everything we're about to get into. So, let's just start. I have some bullet points. So, like I said, I was really told that the place I was getting a job with was out of the box. It wasn't conventional, it wasn't clinical. It was going to be different. Like, one of the big things was not asking for people's diagnoses, not dealing with person A, you're a paranoid schizophrenic, person B is, chronically depressed, whatever. You're dealing with the people as people. Great. Hey, I mean, that's why I don't like any of this civil rights nonsense. I don't like there being rights for gay people, rights for black people, rights for, you should just have a set of rights that works for everyone, and everyone should just be encompassed into that set of rights. So, I'm all down with, not dealing with people by their diagnoses, but dealing with them as per an individual level. Um, and I also want to just to sort of set a bar for so I don't just sound like I'm bitching and moaning out over petty things, but rather a cumulative effect of all this. When I did my first 3 days of training, we didn't have any guests. So the place I'm working at is a 5-day mental health respite, which is basically a sort of 5-day break, getaway. Again, cool thing. I've been there when there are people with, social anxiety over the holidays and they're having family in town. So they want to stay with us because it's easier for them to go and visit their family with all the extra people there and have somewhere they can come to if it gets to be too much. Sometimes we've had people where they're just, stopping drinking or drugs, and they need a clean, safe environment to be in for 2 to 3 days before they can get into a rehab. Again, cool. I'm with all of that. The other thing is the staff. Each of the staff, whether it's me with having a history with substance abuse issues or other people with depression and anxiety and all that, everyone brings something different to the table. So I'm not knocking these concepts as a whole. In fact, I think there is something really amazing here if it didn't continually get corrupted and manipulated. And we are now at a point where I'm seeing this getting corrupted and manipulated at warp speed levels, which is what sort of led me to this crisis of conscience. So, I did 3 days of training, and then there was no one there. So I didn't really get any experience. I was just sort of shown procedural things, where everything is, what gets filed where, all of that stuff. Then my first shifts on my own, all 3 of our rooms were taken. One guy was blind and trying to play it as if he wasn't, and then he was just pissing himself, his pants, on the couch, like no bladder control whatsoever. At one point, he walks out of the room with his pants around his ankles, soaking wet with urine, and asked me to button them up for him. And I did, without any complaints, because I didn't know that wasn't supposed to be going on. That was out of our realm of, appropriate things to be going on. I just thought it was part of the job. So I was kind of cool with it. So my tolerance for things outside of the scope that should be accepted there is pretty big. But that's one of the other problems is we have a wide net. The term mental illness at this point is a wide net. And then we would have a wide net beyond that where it's like, not having a place to live, because if you're staying for 5 days, on the 5th day, we don't want to put you into a crisis because you got to leave. So we wouldn't take homeless people, very few and far things. So, the weeding out process of those things was very sort of fast and loose. So a lot of people would sort of come in and put us in these situations where, we wouldn't know what to do because they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Hold on, I'm just adding a note in real quick. So, all right, so one of the other things as far as the help I've actually given people, and this is again where we can be unconventional and stuff. There would be a caller, because we have a warm line there, a caller who is an older man who wanted to live his life in accordance to the Bible. And that was a struggle for him because he identifies himself as being homosexual. Doesn't like the term gay because he realizes it's a political term. He views himself as a homosexual. And he would continually end up in these situations where he would be seeing a therapist to help deal with this, to help, try to live his life in accordance with his biblical views and not in accordance with his sexual desires and impulses. And he would say he would work with these people for 3 to 4 months, and then every so often one of them would come to him and say, but wouldn't you be happier if you just had a boyfriend? Wouldn't you just be happier being gay? Now this guy's in like his 60s or so now. You would think if that was the case, he would have come to that conclusion on his own way long ago, especially with society being so accepting now. So when that man is approaching me, asking me for my support, my opinion on whatever is put to the back burner. I'm there to support him in what he wants out of his life. And that's what a peer can do, especially being non-clinical and everything like that. You can really work with people towards what they want. So, have a list of issues here now. Let's get into some of them. So, one of the things that is minor on the list of them that has always really bothered me is there's a over obsession with language in these things. And this is their removing the stigma. So, not only would we not care, or let me rephrase this. not only were we not interested generally in what the people's diagnoses were, we were not allowed as employees to utter their diagnoses. I remember a staff meeting in particular where one girl said that a guest was having a manic episode. Now, when you are talking to a bunch of people that are all familiar with mental illness and everything like that, and you say someone's having a manic episode, well, everyone knows what that means. This girl was reprimanded and told, we don't say that. We say they're having difficulties. Isn't that interesting? Difficulties. Difficulties as having what? Digestive difficulties? Difficulties sleeping? I mean, it gets to a point where there's such an obsession with the sort of PC aspect of this. And another friend of mine would continually ask them, is there a political agenda going on here? And they don't realize it because, again, there's this rights movement things. It is a very leftist agenda-based thing because of the way the left has infiltrated everything, whether it be our handling of trans people and gender issues. And I mean, some of the stuff, not to get derailed too much, I remember a training about cultural sensitivities that said at one point, if a white person says they're hearing the voice of God, they may be schizophrenic and, hearing voices and all of that. If a Hispanic person tells you they're hearing the voice of God, that's their culture. So there is that sort of leftist PC strain running through all of this stuff. So, you had to say difficulties instead of a manic episode. You had to talk about things in a vague sense to the point where you can't fix a problem if you can't identify it. If you can't call the problem by its name, there's no way of properly addressing it. Another thing, as far as the verbalizing of stuff, like I said, transparency was a very big thing. This group would throw around this term left and right. But the main issue is, it was a one-way street. There's transparency as far as the guests are concerned. They can ask to see their files, what's written about them in the comm logs, and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, there is a ridiculous rumor problem within the company because in each level of the staffing of it, there is no transparency from one end to the other. I mean, a week or two ago, we had a meeting with the owner or whatever, and, the person under him, and then our supervisor saying that they want to close our location in our county, merge it with another location in a different county, and they're talking to us. Now, this meeting was scheduled for like a month ago. We have it a month later, and they're saying, well, this is just an idea we're bouncing around with and all of that for budget and all of that. Willy-nilly, though, they said if there was a house available, they would just buy it. So they have the budget to buy a house, but they don't have the budget to keep paying rent on a place they're at now. Don't ask me. But there was no mention of, well, our lease agreement, we have to know by this. And I can't do the 45-minute commute. That's why I say I'm already checked out. At this point, I'm on team fire me if you could afford to. I am just done. So there's no transparency between anything in the actual structure of the business or whatever you want to call it. And I think that segues nicely into this other point of, we're peers when they want to say, you guys understand where the people we serve are coming from and through your experiences and all this and the whole sales pitch thing. But then the moment there becomes a problem, you're no longer seen as a peer, you're professional. And we've had staff members approach approach their supervisors about, well, what if this were to trigger me? You're telling me guests are supposed to be able to lash out at me and I'm not supposed to feel any part of the way. I mean, you really have staff feeling dehumanized by their supervisors because of this whole, you're peer when we have the sales pitch going, but then when we need to whip you into line, you're a professional and your feelings and all of your mental problems are secondary. And that also ties into staff members who may need time off for some issue. I can think of a coworker of mine who deals with epilepsy and migraines. I myself, the other day, had a debilitating migraine. I dare not tell anyone, especially with this COVID nonsense going on, because they're going to tell me I can't come back without a doctor's note and all of this other stuff. So you're employing with people with mental illness, and then when it's convenient, you're ignoring that fact. Or when it's convenient, you're selling yourself with, oh, look at what we're doing, aren't we so great? But then in the treatment of the workers, you're, conveniently ignoring it when you want to treat them however you want to treat them. So there's that structural problem in the first place, where the staff is continually dehumanized and devalued by their superiors because you're just refusing to accept that, you have people in a high stress job and just increasing the demands, and then people dare not say anything or dare not take any time off because, as I was getting to, the woman who deals with epilepsy and things like that, she had to go to the hospital one time for a migraine, and the supervisor was ready to give away her entire week of shifts. I mean, they will turn to you and say, oh, because you needed a day off, I don't think you can handle 3 days a week, so now you're down to 2. So if you're having any sort of issue, you dare not speak it, because it could really screw everything else up for you going forward. So you have a staff that is your staff that has mental illness, but now you have them in a perpetual state of fear and uncertainty about them ever needing to get their own shit straightened out, or if anything. And now also in all of this, the training tells you that this may need to happen, because you're taking on everyone else's problems so often that sometimes you do need just a break from it. But everyone's afraid to ask for that break because they might be reprimanded. So there's that issue. As I sort of hinted on, there's the perpetuating mental illness and fear and all of that. I can think of another aspect where there's also a issue where the rules would be made up on the fly. I can think of an instance in particular where there was a girl who got kicked out of her housing situation. She had nowhere to go, and we then decided that she could stay there, and it would be like until we hooked her up with a place to live. And then the whole time she was with us, she was talking, we all knew she had a drug problem, and she was talking about how she couldn't wait to use and everything like that. And she stayed with us for an entire month. So all the staff is looking at this saying, why didn't they send her to a treatment program? If they knew there was going to be a 30-day window between her getting kicked out of this place and us getting her into another place, why didn't they send her to a 30-day program? So we're all looking around at each other and being like, does the office staff even know what's going on here? Do they even know this person? Why are we essentially giving a crackhead a crack house? So she ends up going into the new apartment, calls us up days later. Guess what she's doing there? She's smoking crack. I talked to the supervisor about it, and I asked her, well, why didn't we try to get her into a treatment program? And they say, oh, well, now we're trying to encourage her to do so. Now? Now after you put a roof over her head? Now that she doesn't have a care in the world, you think you're going to talk this girl into going into a treatment program? Like, these are the types of things where I'm looking at this and I'm like, are you guys setting everyone up for failure just to keep your business going? Like, what is happening here? You can't tell me that the people are our priority when this is what's going on. Every year we would have these Christmas parties where we would be told, oh, we're looking to open this facility, or, like I said, they said for our location in our county, talking about buying a house, they've been saying that the 3 or so years I've been with the company. And this is why at some point everyone starts to look at it like it's a Ponzi scheme. because you're continually given this sales pitch of we're about the people and we're expanding and we're opening a 100-bed detox thing and this and that. And I know all, a lot harder to do than it is to say, but I have not seen any of it come to fruition. So, and also in this 3 years time, I don't know of anyone getting a raise or anything like that, and we are all making less than fast food workers for dealing with high stress jobs where we are in hospitalization, crisis aversion and avoidance is technically what we're in. Keeping people out of the hospitals if it's not a situation that needs the hospital. Making less than a McDonald's employee. And meanwhile, they're just like, oh, well, we could just buy a house for it if we wanted or if it was available. Oh, we want to open a 100-bed detox facility and all this other stuff. None of it ever comes to be. So you're continually sold this dream that it's coming and we're going to treat you guys better and there's going to be new facilities and new opportunities, and none of it's coming to pass. And now, in fact, they're talking about consolidating rather than expanding. So it is just out of control. So in that way, it mirrors a Ponzi scheme. We have a situation now where with all of that, they are switching to a Medicaid model. So now the big problem. So before all of this, let's just talk about this year for a second. In the start of the year, we're given a new intake packet. And with all of this, now the other thing, which really shows you the structural problem of this company from the top down, every 6 months or so, we are given a new updated job responsibility list to sign. I have never been at any job that requires me to sign any sort of handbook responsibility list anytime other than once when I am hired. This place, it's continual. It is nonstop. I mean, I've said before that you would think someone in this company has a vendetta against trees at the rate that they want paperwork done. It is so off base from the vision we are sold and just so now into bureaucratic paper pushing nonsense that it is, I've really had a crisis of conscience the past couple days because of this. So you have all that going on. In the beginning of the year, we were given this new intake packet. Now, mind you, the intake stuff prior to this was about a page. It was as simple as could be. And even when some of the female staff would feel uncomfortable because you're alone there, it's just you and them. If someone got really out of hand, got violent, you have to call the police. You have no backup on site. So we would continually ask, hey, can we add, questions about substance abuse into the intake packet? Can we add this? Can we add that? Well, now in the start of this year, we're given this intake packet instead of the page that's asking for everything, including their diagnoses, which, as I said, that was at one point people are getting reprimanded for even mentioning that these people have a diagnosis, and now you're asking for it. And now all of this is being done without any of the management staff seeming to acknowledge that we are completely shifting directions, that we are completely doing whatever. And you already know the reason for it. Money. And we're a non-profit, but money is the reason for everything. And it really starts to show at this point that no one gives a shit about these people. They only give a shit about money. And they will turn a blind eye and stick their head in the sand whenever an inconvenient truth starts to arise. So, intake packet, asking for your medical history. I mean, it's like hospital level intake packet. Medical history, work history, your substance abuse history, your primary doctor, all of it is in there. So there's that. Well, we never really got a chance to get into that because of COVID. Now, I will say that during COVID, they did have us working from home. We were doing the warm line calls from home. And I really appreciated that because I also worked at a restaurant. And when everything became uncertain, I was certain that I still had this income. So I really, was grateful for that. Now, however, though, we are at the point months later where 3 to 4 people a day are dying from COVID. You know, the other day it's 3 or 4, and I know one of them. They were someone who's 102 years old, that if they had died at any point in the past 5 years, their family would not be surprised. And then they're told it's because of COVID, and the family is pissed. So 2 to 3 people a day are dying, and meanwhile, these people want a temperature taken, O2 levels, do I have symptoms, smell some essential oils to make sure you can smell. Mind you, our medical records, because they're now keeping a medical record of my temperature every day I go to work and everything like that. Well, these are just kept open. See, HIPAA, you know, privacy laws for medical stuff and all that. HIPAA, obviously, similar to everything else, only applies to the people we're serving. It doesn't apply to the staff, I guess. So there's that. And in general, before I get into the other stuff, I'll mention, you know, one of the other things they also pushed on us a lot was training. Like, we have this training program that you do, and then every year it resets, and you have to do all the same training over again, and then all the same training over again, and then all this. I mean, the repetition of it all, it really is like a mind control thing where it's like, you know, again, we're trying to say we're outside of the box, and any help that I've ever given anyone, like genuine help, impact made in someone's life, has all been made because of me as a person. It has nothing to do with any of this training bullshit, because that's what it is. And it's all, I mean, so I really got to the point where I started to look at the things and I said, we're not outside the box. We have just shrunk the box to be smaller than everywhere else, and have told ourselves we're doing something different by shrinking the box rather than being outside of it. So, I mean, like I said, the trainings would have ridiculous things in them, and it's just over and over and over, and it really seemed like my experience was secondary to this fucking mind control nonsense you want me buying into. Because I have questions about the mental health care industry. Like, if all of these illnesses are from chemical imbalances, how come there's no test? How come you can't test for what chemicals are off balance or not? You can do it with blood tests. You can do it with all sorts of testing. How come there are none for mental illnesses? So you're more often than not getting a chemical correction for a chemical imbalance that you have no proof of actually existing. It's just diagnosed off of symptoms. So that, you know, that's a whole nother tangent about how the mental health industry is screwed up in the first place. But that's why I really thought this was an opportunity to help people in an unconventional manner. So we have this new entry packet, coronavirus happens, and then, you know, in order to go to work, they are testing us, getting all this medical records and all that. Now, also the other thing is, because the way they have this place structured, there is something going on where we can't work over 3 shifts a week. If you work too much, this is the other problem I've never seen anywhere else, is where you can have a insufficient amount of staff to cover all of your shifts, but you also have staff willing to work as much as possible, and you will not let them. And juxtapose that now with the staff being afraid to call out, needing to have their temperature taken and everything else. So they don't want you to work too much, but they want you jumping through hoops in order to work. And it's just like, again, it's this very sort of, you know, when you factor in all the COVID thing and their requests with all of that, and the fact that no one's dying from it anymore and everything like that, I started looking at Bitterman's chart of coercion, and it really starts to seem like this is an abusive relationship between the employer and the employee, especially when you are specifically hiring people with mental health issues and then exacerbating them, putting them in situations to exacerbate them, and then when they voice their concerns, you're then reprimanding and punishing them and disregarding their mental illness and telling them, well, you're a professional, and then wanting to turn your back and then sell them on, oh, well, look at us hiring all these people with mental illness, and aren't we so wonderful? So then what goes on now is we get this new data entry thing, or we're told it's a data entry thing, called awards, which I guess is Medicaid's data entry thing. And it's basically set up for service plan coordinators. So now we're being told to enter our information into this new system, which is what we thought it was, but now we're also being told to set up these service plans and to day by day do these things. So now our whole, and it's real interesting that we continually sign these updated job requirement lists, but now they've changed the whole format of our job without one of these forms magically, because they're trying to ignore the fact that they've changed the whole format and expectation of our job just for Medicaid funding, because money is the reason for all of it. So it's an inconvenient thing that now we're completely asking something different. We're trying to fit what we do into this new format for funding, but because it doesn't fit, then we're also trying to change what we do to fit that format. And again, there's all of this like cut, money, money, money going on. And throughout all of this, I've looked at this situation because, again, I thought this was potentially something really amazing, where, like, I always asked, like, how come we're not trying to, we say we're not institutional, how come we're not trying to outreach to the young male who's feeling depressed because he seems to have no opportunity in the job market, and maybe he needs to sit down with an advocate who could really help try to get him with a resume put together and looking around for the right jobs in the right way and everything like that. You know, if we're doing this for the schizophrenic who doesn't know what state he's in or what his name is and thinks the TV's talking to him, and this probably isn't going to end up being successful in the long run anyway, unfortunately, well, how come we're not just doing it to the person who's down and out and has situational depression rather than clinical depression? How come, we're not trying to open up these services to the housewife who, has just spent the past 3 months with the kids cooped up at home and maybe needs 5 days somewhere else to decompress? How come we're saying we're not institutional, but everyone who comes through our doors is institutionalized, and the only reason they know about us is from hearing us mentioned through other institutions? There is no outreach, there is no marketing, there is no sales, there's no PR. I mean, that is just the reality of it. No one I speak to, the only people I speak to who are aware of this place are people who work within the industry. Nothing outside of it. So there really isn't a look to expand. They are completely fine with their sights set on the bottom of the barrel. And apparently this whole switching to the Medicaid function is to ensure that everyone is from the bottom of the barrel, because then they're going to end up with issues if people have any other sort of insurance, from what I've heard. Not 100% factual on that, but you still get the point that there's no outreach to anyone but institutionalized people when we are supposed to be the non-institutional institution. So, there's so much. Another issue that I was just made aware of is that during last week, there was a big storm, there was a power outage. I was told I was working my overnight shift from home. That's fine and dandy. Well, the next evening, after they had set up the phone calls to be forwarded to my house and all that, my sister yells up to me and lets me know that we are still getting the phone calls forwarded to my house phone. Well, now this is a problem, because you have people that are calling a mental health hotline that it's supposed to be encrypted, it's supposed to be secure, HIPAA compliant, and it's going to my house phone, and I'm not the one answering it, Well, just an hour or so ago, when I was on the phone with a friend of mine, I got a phone call. It was one of my coworkers. But the thing is my coworker was trying to call our job. So even after that day after, when I let my supervisor know, hey, you didn't shut off the call forwarding, a week later now, my phone call has been getting all of these phone calls. So I'm pretty sure, that's probably not legal to say the least. But, especially if I already made them aware that this was going on and now it's a week later and it's still going on. Um, the supervisor that's in charge of this, I have warmed up to a lot. I think she does the best she can. And this is not me making any sort of personal criticisms of her. This is me commenting specifically on a situational level. I've heard they're hiring an assistant for her, which a lot of the other coworkers feel is a problem because the other coworkers are willing to work, and if it's work that pertains to running our location, it is a slap in the face to bring in someone new rather than to utilize and maximize the staff you already have, for especially in a situation where this job never required assistance before, and now you're talking about merging this location with another location that already has a supervisor. So it seems like it would have evened out anyway. So there's budget for assistance for jobs that never needed them before. There's not enough budget for, anyone to work over 3 shifts a week somehow. Like, none of it makes any sense. Like I said, there really seems like there's a cooking the books Ponzi scheme aspect of it. And then when this all comes around, people start looking at their pay stubs and notice that it doesn't say the agency we work for. It says Ethan Allen, which is a temp agency. Now, I've been on direct deposit for a while. I don't know if that's changed. But again, they must be getting something out of this by not actually having people on their books, but by doing the others. I've gotten emails lately that are like, we need to use the new system. Here's day 1, day 2, this, and that. Money, money, money. Do this for the funding. Money, money, money. And because we help people. Like, I mean, now helping people is just a tag on compared to money, money, money. Again, for a nonprofit. So, all of this going on, and like I said, there is this in the other thing with all of it is, so there's this consolidating moving thing that I can't do. So there's now this big uncertainty with how much longer I could even be working at this place, and me not feeling as if I'm getting full transparency from them about what's really going on here. And then there's also now this aspect where, as the coronavirus is more treatable, less people are dying, our agency is still in 2.2 million people are going to die mode, wipe everything down twice a day at the start and end of your shift, even though the person before you just did it. I mean, there is a level of lowering immune systems and perpetuating fear about this where it really starts to seem like a Munchausen syndrome / Munchausen's by proxy, where, and it's funny because I mentioned that in the comm log and noticed this morning my entry was deleted, but as someone who's been quarantined as a kid, who was kept in the dark about a lot of these things just because I probably wasn't capable of even understanding what was going on, this is really not sitting well with me, where I'm continually told to act and be treated as if I am sick when I am not. So that was one of the things that is really where, all of this stuff was going on, and a lot of us were just like, I'm just playing the cards I'm dealt. And now it's just hit a point where it's like, no, I'm not playing the game anymore. So, yeah, I think that covers most of the bullet points. I mean, really, there's so much more. I'm sure when I upload this, I'm going to be saying, damn, I should have said this. I should have said that. I should have said this. I mean, all of my coworkers have their own lists. I really think I touched on most of it at this point. But I just wanted to sort of get that out there because, like I said, I think they're conceptually at the root of it. There's something that could really help people and be really good for people. So, let me end on this note. Like I said, it was told to me that this was a rights movement, that this, to not see this as a job, but to see this as a rights movement. And when I look at, sure, blacks and gays and all that, they have their lobbying, organizations that try to get things done politically for them and this and that. And, I guess, all right. But when I look at people saying this is a rights organization and then it's money, 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 funding, 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 and you're switching your formats off of who's cutting the check today, and then not even seeming to really acknowledge that you're doing that, it seems like it's just sellout behavior. It's a bunch of sellout nonsense where they'll be like, yeah, we're all for the people, and then it's like their rules for how they're for the people will change at a moment's notice based on who's cutting the check. So I just can't do it anymore. The only reason I haven't put in my notice already is because I offered to cover someone's shift today. Or not today, later this week. Sorry, a phone call just came in. It's probably a call meant for my job. So anyway, I will end this here. I got to do my one little edit and then I'll have it uploaded. But make sure you subscribe to the channel and follow me on all your social media. And have a good one, everyone.